I want to tell you the story of one of the worst, maybe the worst wreck of my entire life. It happened when I was 23 years old. And when I say wreck, you can understand that metaphorically or literally, because yes, it's been a metaphor for me for the rest of my life, and at the moment, it darn near killed me and my brother in a trailer wreck like few others. Now you may not know, and perhaps you've not seen the videos that we have made about the sawmill that I built when I was 21 and 22 years old. I built a sawmill. It was an experience. It was a vertical learning curve. It was exciting. I loved it. I ended up selling it, 20 years ago or something. But at the first part of building that sawmill, it was an insoluble problem about how do you make a 50-inch diameter saw blade cut? How do you make it cut? Well, as it turns out, I figured that out, but I hadn't figured out how to make any money with it. Have you ever heard of crossarms? It's a particular board. It's the boards that hold up the power lines and the telephone wires. It's the horizontal boards that hold the insulators and all of the accoutrements of electricity transmission on the wooden power poles, usually. They are, I think the crossarms that I was familiar with was like 3 3/4 by 4 3/4, something like that. And when I was trying to learn how to make money with a sawmill, I learned that crossarms were an expensive and very valuable Douglas fir board. And if you could make them, you could sell them. And if you could sell them, you could make money. And that's what I needed to do. Because I had done 4 or 5 custom sawing jobs here in Douglas County, sawing ranch lumber. I pulled it down to Etna, California, and sawed 27,000 feet for a guy who had a little game park down there. Great adventures, learned a lot, worked hard, but I wasn't making as much money as I thought was possible. Well, right then, the economy tanked. The spotted owl triggered the end of old growth logging in the timber capital of the nation. And so unemployment was 23%. And I was 23 years old. And it was a nasty confluence of events, I'll tell you. 23% is tough. So it was at that juncture that I decided I can't find any more custom sawing jobs, so I want to buy some logs and saw some crossarms and sell them and become rich, I thought. I found a nice little stand of timber. They were trees that were small enough in diameter that they were not expensive logs. That is, they were not big enough to be what is termed a special mill. They were just number 1, number 2 mills, fairly low dollar log, but I could tell that they would meet the specifications for crossarms, tight specs, at least 8 growth rings per inch, no more than 2 3/4 inch diameter knots in the whole piece, no more than 1 inch and 12 slope of grain, and no heart centers and no wane. They had to be a nice board. And I thought, if I bought some of those nice little trees, it was a stand that was growing close together and they were reaching for the sky and they had very little taper. And I thought, if the Talcotts, Neil and Mark Talcott will sell me those logs, I think I can make money. So I pulled my sawmill up there. I happened to get there on the very afternoon that Mark, the young man, had just broken his leg, cut down a little whip tree. It hit the ground, the butt swung around, hit him right at the top of his cork boots. I pulled my truck in. I didn't hear anything except somebody calling for help. I went up there in the hot sun was Neil, probably 58 years old at the time, maybe a little younger, holding up the head and shoulders of his 5 or 6-year-old strong young man, Mark, with a badly broken leg as they were waiting for the EMTs who had somehow been called in the years before cell phones from the Glide Volunteer Fire Department to show up and get Mark out of the brush. Well, it was a rough way to start the job. But I went ahead and set up my mill, and Neil was now logging by himself, and he was setting the nice butt cuts up onto my mill for me. I was paying a premium price. And I sawed a big old stack of crossarms. Well, now I had to get them to Eugene. Eugene is where the market was. Cascadian Crossarm Company, I think. And yeah, they were paying what I thought was a high price. I think it was maybe $450 or $500 a thousand. And that was maybe 3 or 4 times what studs were bringing. So I had these cross arms cut and I had to transport them 80 miles. And so I went down and talked to my uncle Jim Wadsworth, his own legend. Jim Wadsworth was quite a man. He served in the submarines in World War II. He was something, my dad's older brother. And he had a cattle truck. And I went up to my Uncle Jim. I had built my sawmill partially in his shop. He liked me. He was on my team. I said, Uncle Jim, I'd like to hire you and your cattle truck to haul crossarms to Eugene. What? He was a little bit, Jim was crusty. Yeah, Jim's worth his own video. But he agreed, bless his heart, and the racks were off of his truck, and he drove it up Susan Creek, and we loaded, 16 or 20,000 pounds of crossarms, and we drove up to Eugene, and we unloaded them, and we sorted through every piece, and the head grader culled the ones they wouldn't accept and showed me which ones they would accept, and I kind of broke even on that load, but I learned what they wanted, and back we went. Well, my dad, when he learned that at age 23 I had bothered his older brother and burned up his day hauling to Eugene, he said, leave Jim alone. You can't be bothering Jim. You need a trailer. Well, I didn't have any money. And my dad wanted to help me, and my dad was pretty impulsive, and my dad found a trailer, used, 3 axles, mobile home axles, single tires, 20 feet, deck over, and he decided it was perfect. Apparently he didn't stop to check the condition of the brakes on those mobile home axles, but I hooked onto that, and it was heavy. I had a 3/4 ton Chevy pickup, 3/4 ton with a Barden bumper. That's just a factory bumper, not even a receiver hitch. And I thought, well, I better beef this bumper up a little bit if I'm going to haul crossarms. So I welded some plate I did a little bit of cheesy welding on that, and I thought, that ought to do it. And I hooked onto my trailer and checked the lights and drug it up Susan Creek. It's probably 30 miles east up into the Cascades. And Neil started putting units of crossarms on there until I told him, whoa. And I told him, whoa, because, man, the tongue weight was going to tear the bumper off. My 3/4 ton truck was squatted down. And I said, Neil, I'm sorry, but you got to move some of those units back a little bit. You sure, son? Yeah. So he scooted the front 2 units back. We put 4 units on there. And he moved it back until it didn't look like it was going to flatten the tires on my truck. And I tied them down and headed down the road, down the gravel road to the North Umpqua Highway, down the highway, and right away I learned that if I got over 35 miles an hour, the truck and trailer started doing this, right? We'll call it a fishtail, but it's worse than that. It's a siwash back and forth oscillation at the hitch between the heavy trailer with not enough tongue weight and the truck that only probably weighed, 5,000 or 6,000 pounds soaking wet. So I thought, well, we'll just drive 35 miles an hour, and down I went, and I fueled up, and I got on I-5 north with 16,000 pounds of lumber on that trailer, bumper hitch. And headed north, kind of over on the shoulder of I-5 with my emergency flashers on, bink, 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 35 miles an hour on an interstate freeway. And we made it 12 miles north to Sutherland, and there's a hill that then over the top of the hill goes down to Calapooya Creek, pretty good sized little creek. A river in some localities, down at the bottom, and it's a long hill. And I'm coming down on the shoulder, easing along, no hurry, and I start getting up to that magic 35 mile an hour number, and the trailer starts doing this, and yeah. And I put my foot on the brake on my truck, and man, nothing happened. And I'm picking up a little more speed, and the yaw started getting worse, and so I reached down to the brake controller, newly installed, and I pushed the little thumb slide over clear to the right, and absolutely nothing happened. Nothing happened. And I mashed the brake pedal down, and nothing happened then either. And now I'm getting up to where it's the zigzag, the fishtail is just about out of control. And I'm about 2/3 of the way down the hill. And in my 23-year-old brilliance, I think, well, maybe if I stomp down on that accelerator, I can pull out in front of that and straighten this problem out and get to the bottom of the hill and up the other side and be fine. I thought, yeah, I'll be fine. So I stomped down on the accelerator, I-5, 2 lanes north, 2 lanes south, and right away, I was up to about 60 or 65 miles an hour, and that trailer would swing the butt end of my truck over left, all 4 tires on the truck smoking and squealing. And then it would go the other way and swing the butt end of my truck the other way, all 4 tires smoking and squealing. And I could spin that wheel with absolutely no resistance at all and back and forth until we finally slammed into the Jersey rail. You know, the concrete dividing rail between north and south. Bam! And half that load of those cross arms went right over into the oncoming traffic. And now I'm heading off on the east side of the freeway, completely out of control. Half the load still on the trailer. And I think, I'm not going to clear this bridge. I'm going into Calapooya Creek. Well, we did clear the bridge. We got off just on the north side of Calapooya Creek and slammed into the guardrail just on the tailing side of the bridge. And the trailer tore off and flipped over end-o and landed the back of the trailer upside down on the back of my truck and blew out both the back tires, and the dust began to settle. And I-5 was plugged north and plugged south, and not one other automobile got so much as a scratch. No one was hurt. It was one of those instances where I cannot deny that the grace of God kept me alive for 1 day more. Anyway, how did that work? I think I threw it in 4-wheel drive, put it in drive, and pulled out from underneath that trailer. Yeah. A tow truck, Dean Jewell, was just coming over the hill behind me, and he looked down there, and when he came up, he said, it looked like somebody was tearing the bridge apart. I got the truck out of there, kind of dragged the trailer off to the side. Everybody on I-5 got out and started throwing cross arms into the center median and off the side. Traffic freed up. A state policeman pulled up, a young state policeman, and he gave me a ticket for inadequate safety chains. Bless his heart. An old trucker who had been out throwing, I'm sure he was probably all of 55, got out and he was throwing cross arms onto the median, and he walked by, he said, how much weight did you have on that trailer, son? And I said, about 16,000 pounds. And he shook his head and he got in his truck and on he went. And my dad had trucks at the time. He was hauling peeler core. And he had a radio. This was long before cell phones. And I got in touch with him and I said, well, Dad, everybody's still alive. My brother Brett had been riding with me. But I had a trailer wreck north of Sutherland. I don't remember exactly what he said. But about an hour later, he showed up there with his truck. It had bunks for short logs for peeler core. And we threw my payload of cross arms on there. Half of them were wrecked. Actually, probably 2/3 of them were wrecked, marred, chipped, cracked, broken. We threw the good ones on. The junk ones went home. We had 4x4s for years and firewood. And I hauled that little portion of my payload up to Eugene, and I sold it to the people there at Cascadian Cross Arms and told them my sad story. And they didn't exactly laugh at me, but you couldn't blame them if they would have. 23-year-old kid. And I went home, told Kelly what had happened. We gave thanks that I was still alive, and we decided right then and right there to move to Wyoming, because the mineral economy was still booming, cattle prices were high, barley and soybeans were high, and so we moved to Powell, Wyoming. I eventually moved the sawmill back there, because once you have sawmilling in your brains and in your blood, you've almost got to do it. But boy, I learned some valuable lessons. The first one being, you've got to have enough tongue weight on your trailer. Young men, make sure you have all the tongue weight that your vehicle can possibly stand on that trailer. It will keep you tracking straight and true. You can't outrun a fishtail in a trailer. All you can do is pray that you have brakes. You can't let your ambition run out too far ahead of your ignorance. And if an old man tells you, son, are you sure you want to move those units back? You ought to stop and say, what do you mean, Mr. Talcott? And he would have told me. And I can tell you that to this day, if I'm driving a heavy trailer, like with my excavator on behind a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton, and I feel that little siwash at the hitch, whew, I almost get sick to my stomach. And maybe that is what painful education does for you. It teaches you a lesson in such a way that you can have an emotional response to it because of the magnitude of the calamity that could result if you don't get smarter as you get older, and if you're not able to take the advice of the people around you who actually know something. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.